Have you ever witnessed someone speaking in tongues? It's a fascinating and often controversial phenomenon. Some see it as a miraculous gift from God, while others view it as a psychological behavior. Today, we're going to explore this deeply personal and complex topic from both religious and scientific perspectives. What is speaking in tongues, really? Is it a divine language, or is it something our minds create? Let's dive in. First, let's look at the religious perspective, primarily within certain Christian traditions. Speaking in tongues, or glossolalia, is often considered a spiritual gift, a direct sign of the Holy Spirit's presence. Believers point to the Bible, specifically the book of Acts, chapter 2. On the day of Pentecost, the apostles were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues, so that people from many different nations could understand them in their own native languages. This event is seen as the birth of the Christian Church and a powerful demonstration of God's ability to transcend human barriers. In this context, speaking in tongues serves several purposes. It's seen as a form of prayer and praise, a direct line of communication with God that bypasses the limitations of human intellect. Believers describe it as a deeply intimate and spiritually edifying experience, where the Spirit prays even when the mind doesn't know what to say. Another purpose is for the edification of the church. The Apostle Paul, in his first letter to the Corinthians, discusses spiritual gifts. He explains that when someone speaks in tongues in a public gathering, there should be an interpreter, another spiritual gift, so that the message can be understood and benefit everyone present. This interpretation transforms the utterance from a personal prayer into a prophetic word for the community. For many Christians, the experience is profoundly real. They don't see it as something they are faking or forcing. It feels like a flow of language that comes from a place beyond themselves, a divine utterance that brings comfort, strength, and a closer connection to God. It's not about linguistic structure but about spiritual expression. So, from this viewpoint, speaking in tongues is not just real, it's a sacred and miraculous gift. It's a tangible sign of a relationship with the divine, a mystery to be embraced rather than analyzed. Now, let's switch gears and explore the secular and psychological perspective. Scientists and psychologists who study glossolalia approach it not as a theological question, but as a human behavior that can be observed and analyzed. From this standpoint, speaking in tongues is often described as a learned behavior. Studies have shown that people who speak in tongues often do so after being exposed to it in their religious communities. They learn the sounds, the cadence, and the rhythm by listening to others. It's not necessarily a conscious imitation, but more of a social learning process. A person in a highly emotional, faith-filled environment might be more susceptible to adopting this behavior as a way of expressing their devotion and fitting in with their community. So, what's happening in the brain during glossolalia? Neuroscientists have conducted fascinating studies to find out. Using brain imaging techniques like SPECT scans, researchers have observed the brain activity of individuals while they were speaking in tongues. One study from the University of Pennsylvania found that the frontal lobes, the part of the brain that controls language and willful control, were less active during glossolalia. This suggests that the person isn't consciously controlling the vocalizations. It's not like they are intentionally making up words. At the same time, the parietal lobes, which are involved in sensory information and orientation, remained active. This finding is interesting because it aligns with the subjective experience of speakers, who often report feeling a loss of control, as if something else is speaking through them. The brain scans don't prove a divine source, but they do suggest that it's not a deliberate act of fraud. Furthermore, linguists have analyzed recordings of glossolalia and have consistently found that it doesn't possess the structural properties of a real language. Natural languages have complex rules, syntax, and a consistent set of sounds or phonemes. The utterances produced during glossolalia typically lack this complexity. They often consist of a limited set of syllables and sounds, repeated and rearranged in various ways, often borrowing from the speaker's native language. From a linguistic standpoint, there is no evidence to suggest that anyone speaking in tongues is actually speaking a foreign language they've never learned, as was described in the book of Acts. Instead, It appears to be a form of vocalization that mimics language but isn't one. So, where does this leave us? We have two very different ways of understanding the same phenomenon. On one hand, from a religious standpoint, millions of people around the world have a deeply personal and meaningful experience with speaking in tongues. For them, it is a sacred gift, a form of spiritual expression that strengthens their faith and connects them to God. Their experience is real to them, and scientific analysis of brain patterns or linguistic structure doesn't invalidate the spiritual significance they find in it. Faith, by its nature, often operates in a realm beyond empirical proof. For believers, the proof is in the experience itself and the positive transformation it brings to their lives. They might argue that trying to analyze a divine gift with human tools is like trying to measure love with a ruler. On the other hand, from a secular or psychological standpoint, glossolalia is seen as a fascinating psychological and neurological phenomenon. It's viewed as a learned behavior, influenced by social and emotional factors, that corresponds with specific patterns of brain activity. It has a form of non-linguistic vocalization that provides a powerful emotional release and reinforces a sense of belonging within a community. Scientists wouldn't necessarily say it's not real. They would say it's a real human behavior with explainable psychological and neurological underpinnings. The question of a divine source is simply outside the scope of what science can test or prove. Ultimately, the debate continues because faith and science are asking different questions. Religion asks why. And what is the spiritual meaning? Seeking purpose and connection to the divine. Science asks how. And what are the mechanics? Seeking to understand the observable, measurable processes of the natural world. Can these two perspectives coexist? For some people, yes. A person of faith might say, "Of course my frontal lobes are less active, it's not me speaking, it's the Holy Spirit." They might see the science as simply describing the physical mechanism that God uses to manifest this spiritual gift. For others, the scientific explanation is sufficient, and they see no need to invoke a supernatural cause. The question of whether speaking in tongues is real depends entirely on your definition of real. If real means a divinely imparted and learned foreign language, the scientific evidence is lacking. If real means a genuine, deeply felt experience that has a profound psychological and spiritual impact on an individual, then it is absolutely real for millions of people. It's a powerful testament to the complexity of the human mind, the depth of spiritual experience, and the many ways we seek to connect with something larger than ourselves. What do you think? Have you had an experience with this? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. Thanks for watching. And if you found this exploration interesting, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into fascinating topics. See you next time.